Welcome to World Code Updates, your daily briefing on everything happening around the world. The air is thick with salt and tension, a heavy mix that clings to every surface and every breath. The air is thick with salt and tension, as if the ocean itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to break the uneasy calm. The air is thick with salt and tension. Every glance, every movement is loaded with anticipation. On the bridge of a Philippine Coast Guard vessel, sailors watch a Chinese research ship, the Haiyang moving methodically through contested waters, its path deliberate and unhurried. This is no accident, it's a silent confrontation, a daily dance of power in the South China Sea, where every maneuver is a message and every silence is loaded with meaning. The Filipino crew documents every move, issuing radio challenges that go unanswered, their voices echoing across the waves, met only by static. They are a thin line of defense in a vast, disputed sea, dwarfed by the enormity of the ocean and the scale of the challenge they face. Each day feels like the brink of something bigger, a moment suspended between routine patrol and the possibility of crisis. The Chinese vessel claims to be conducting research, but its presence is a clear assertion of sovereignty, a statement made not with words, but with steel and flag. The Philippine Coast Guard, often outmatched, can only watch, report, and hope today isn't the day a standoff turns hot, knowing that a single misstep could escalate into conflict. These encounters are becoming more frequent and aggressive, each one a test of resolve and restraint. Chinese maritime militia vessels disguised as fishing boats swarm Filipino ships, creating a blockade that stops just short of open warfare, blurring the line between civilian and combatant. For the crew, abstract lines on a map become a physical space they must defend, a reality that shapes every decision and every risk they take. They are on the front lines of a struggle for resources, sovereignty, and the future of international law, their actions watched by allies and rivals alike. The world watches as these small boats navigate the treacherous currents of 21st century power politics, their journeys broadcast across the globe. Each sunrise brings the potential for a new flashpoint in what many now call the world's next big war zone, a place where the future is as uncertain as the shifting tides. Why does this sea matter so much? Look at a map. The South China Sea may seem like just another body of water, but its importance is hard to overstate. The South China Sea is a superhighway for global trade, connecting East Asia with the rest of the world. Every day, thousands of ships navigate these waters, carrying everything from electronics and cars to clothing and food. 1/3 of all global shipping, over $5 trillion in trade, passes through these waters each year. That's nearly 100,000 ships annually, making it one of the busiest maritime corridors on the planet. A disruption here would send shockwaves through the global economy. Supply chains would grind to a halt, prices would spike, and markets around the world would feel the impact almost instantly. Beneath the surface lie vast reserves of oil and natural gas, potentially 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of gas. These resources are crucial for powering industries and fueling growth in the region and beyond. For energy-hungry nations, securing these resources is a matter of national security. Control over these reserves can shape a country's economic future and geopolitical influence. The sea is also a vital source of food, accounting for over 10% of the world's fish catch. Millions of people depend on these waters for their livelihoods and daily meals. Overfishing and territorial disputes have pushed fish stocks to the brink. The competition for dwindling resources is intensifying, threatening both the environment and regional stability. The fight for control is also a fight for food security. For many coastal communities, access to these waters means survival. This convergence of strategic location, resources, and food makes the South China Sea a cauldron of competing interests. It's a place where economics, politics, and survival all collide. Control here means influence over global commerce, energy, and the ability to feed millions. Whoever dominates these waters holds a powerful lever over the world's future. This is why the arguments are so fierce, and why nations are willing to risk so much. The stakes are nothing less than economic security and regional dominance. The South China Sea is the economic and strategic heart of the Indo-Pacific, a crossroads where the world's interests converge and collide. To understand today's conflict, look back in time. For centuries, the South China Sea was a shared space of exchange, a maritime Silk Road connecting cultures and commerce. Power was fluid, defined by control over trade routes, not rigid borders. Empires like Srivijaya and Ming China projected influence through navigation and tribute, not conquest. Historical records from Vietnam and the Philippines show deep-rooted connections to these waters. The modern nation-state with strict borders is a recent invention, brought by European colonial powers. This transformed a shared maritime commons into exclusive territories, setting the stage for today's disputes. China points to ancient maps as proof of historic rights. Its neighbors cite their own histories and modern law. The past is a weapon, used by all sides to justify present claims. The ghosts of ancient fleets still haunt these waters, their wakes crossing paths with modern warships. The most controversial line on any map today is China's 9-dash line. First appearing in 1947, it claims roughly 90% of the South China Sea, overlapping the EEZs of Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei. Beijing is deliberately vague about what the line means, claiming islands, waters, or historic rights. This ambiguity is strategic, but it directly conflicts with the claims of 5 other parties. Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan all assert their own rights based on history, geography, and international law. The Philippines has renamed its portion the West Philippine Sea to reinforce its claim. Malaysia and Brunei focus on the southern Spratlys and offshore resources. Taiwan's claim mirrors China's, adding complexity. These disputes have real consequences: who can fish, drill, or build outposts. The 9-dash line cuts deep into neighbors' maritime zones, creating permanent friction with little middle ground. To bring order to the world's oceans, the UN created the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. It sets clear rules: a 12 nautical mile territorial sea, and a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone, or EZ. Nearly every country in the region, including China, has signed UNCLOS, but China's 9-dash line extends far beyond what UNCLOS allows. The core dispute: do historic rights override modern international law? The Philippines, Vietnam, and others say no. UNCLOS is the only legal basis. In 2013, the Philippines took China to an international tribunal in The Hague. China refused to participate, but the case went ahead. In 2016, the tribunal ruled: China's historic rights and 9-dash line have no legal basis. Many Spratly features are legally rocks, not islands, and don't generate EEZs. China rejected the ruling, but it remains a powerful diplomatic tool for its rivals. The ruling is legally binding, but there's no international police to enforce it. Its power lies in its moral and legal weight. Words and laws are one thing, concrete and steel are another. China has transformed submerged reefs into massive artificial islands in the Spratlys, fortifying them with runways, radar, and missile batteries. These are unsinkable aircraft carriers, shifting the strategic balance. China can now project military power across the entire South China Sea, monitoring and potentially controlling all shipping and air traffic. For other claimants, their small outposts are now overshadowed by Chinese fortresses. The US sees these islands as a direct challenge to its influence and freedom of navigation. In response, the US Navy conducts regular freedom of navigation operations, FONOPs, sailing warships near Chinese-controlled islands. These operations often lead to tense encounters, with Chinese ships shadowing American assets. Confrontations are no longer rare. There have been several close calls. A collision or accidental shoot-down could quickly escalate into a major crisis between nuclear powers. The Fortress Islands have turned the South China Sea into a permanent military frontier. The risk of miscalculation is ever present. Each new base cements China's presence and raises the stakes for everyone. The region is now a chessboard of military power. The world watches, hoping the next move isn't a fatal one. The South China Sea conflict is not just a regional dispute, it's a global problem with far-reaching consequences. The world's economy depends on the stability of these shipping lanes. Nearly a third of all global maritime trade passes through these waters. Any conflict or blockade here could halt the flow of goods, disrupt supply chains, and trigger a global recession that would affect every corner of the planet. That's why nations from Europe to Australia now send naval vessels to assert freedom of navigation, demonstrating their commitment to keeping these vital routes open and secure. The environmental cost is catastrophic. Dredging and island building have destroyed thousands of acres of coral reefs, threatening food security for millions who rely on these waters for their daily catch. The loss of biodiversity here could have ripple effects on marine life across the region. For the US and its allies, the stakes are about upholding international law and preventing a shift to a world where might makes right. They see this as a test of the rules-based order that has kept peace and prosperity for decades. In response, the US has strengthened alliances with the Philippines, Japan, and others, building new security partnerships and conducting joint exercises to deter aggression. But the human cost is real. Filipino and Vietnamese fishermen are harassed, their catches dwindle, and their livelihoods are at risk. Many face intimidation and violence simply for trying to feed their families. Chinese vessels have rammed and sunk foreign fishing boats, sometimes leaving crews adrift and in danger, far from help. These are not just statistics, they are stories of families struggling to survive, waiting anxiously for loved ones to return from increasingly dangerous waters. The conflict is not an abstract game, it's a daily struggle for those who call this sea home, shaping every aspect of their lives and futures. The fight for territory is killing the very resource everyone wants, turning once thriving ecosystems into barren wastelands. The stakes are global, and the consequences are deeply personal, touching lives from bustling cities to remote fishing villages. The world cannot afford to look away. What happens here will shape the future of international order, the environment, and millions of lives. Amid rising tensions, diplomacy continues, slow, frustrating, but essential. ASEAN, a 10-member bloc, has spent decades negotiating a code of conduct with China to manage disputes and prevent conflict. Progress is slow. China prefers bilateral talks and ASEAN is often divided. Still, talks continue because all sides know diplomacy is the only path to lasting stability. Countries like the Philippines and Vietnam balance defense with dialogue, seeking to avoid both conflict and capitulation. International partners like the US, Japan, and Australia help Southeast Asian nations build maritime security. This support gives smaller nations more confidence to assert their rights. Diplomacy here is about building partnerships and resilience, not just talking. The South China Sea is a microcosm of the US-China power struggle. It's a theater where two worldviews collide, one based on international law, the other on historical dominance. The risk of accidental conflict is real. A single mistake could trigger a chain reaction. Leaders must manage this rivalry without stumbling into war. Yet, diplomacy isn't dead. ASEAN-led talks and economic interdependence act as brakes on conflict. China is the largest trading partner for nearly every country in the region. A war would be ruinous for all. Shared interests create incentives for cooperation, even amid competition. The fate of the South China Sea hangs in a delicate balance. Immense beauty, wealth, and danger converge here. The world watches, hoping wisdom prevails over rivalry. The stakes could not be higher.